welcome again to our first English webinar. We're kicking off our English series of webinars today with the topic of employee participation. And I'm happy to introduce you to our founder and CEO, Christoph Jentsch. In the next hour, Christoph will give you an overview of common employee participation programs, but also our new innovative solution that we developed with the GmbH-Token. At the end of the session, there will be some time for questions. So in Zoom, you see there's this Q&A tool, F&A in German. So whenever you have a question throughout the webinar, put it in there, I collect them and have Christoph answer them at the end of the webinar. So yeah, I'm handing over to you, Christoph. Welcome.
So, thank you very much, Laura. So, looking forward to this webinar today. Employee participation is a sometimes boring, but actually very exciting topic, which is at some point for most founders very relevant. So, just give you an overview of what we'll speak about today. I will give you a quick introduction. Then I will go into detail about the current programs, which are ESOPs and VSOPs. And then I will introduce the GmbH token, how it works, and give you a product demo in the end, including a Q&A session. So, but first, why are we doing this? Is your team working for you or with you? I can only say it makes a huge difference if employees or even freelancers or anybody working on the same mission as you do is incentivized by having actually share the company. I have founded several companies now. I've gone through an exit. I've worked as an employee as well as a founder. And my motivation very often was to really make this company a success, and often also based on my share in the company. So it's a huge benefit for you to incentivize your employees. And I think you will see a difference. You will see a difference. They not just do their duty and their day-to-day work, but they're thinking more holistic about the company as a whole, that the company is thriving, so that their shares or their tokens will become very valuable in the future. So what are the goals of an employee participation program? You want to have employee retention, that they are sticking with you long-term. Of course, if you have good employees, you want to keep them as long as you can, and you want them highly motivated. The other side is preserving liquidity in the company, especially as a startup. You sometimes don't pay the highest salaries, but you can compensate for this by offering tokens or shares in the company. So you have less cash salary and higher equity or token salary. In the end, your cap table is basically your most powerful tool to unite a group of people behind a common mission to accomplish your goals, even though you don't have that big amount of cash in the beginning. You want to have a very simple and direct solution. So without, go to notaries or even setting up a special purpose vehicle, and there's so many ways of doing things. You want it simple and direct, easy to understand also for your employees. Otherwise, they don't see the value in it. Of course, it needs to be legally compliant and also tax optimized. There are many ways of doing it, and many are unfortunately not very good tax-wise for the employee. Just as you have heard about dry income, like receiving something, having to pay tax on it without having any liquid assets to pay the tax from. So we want to avoid this problem. And then this is not, sometimes I hear from founders that's not as important to them, that those shares or tokens are tradable, at least easily transferable, but it's very important for the employees. Otherwise, they technically stick with those tokens forever, even after they've left the company, and only if they actually have a way to liquidate those shares, then they become, that's a real value for them. So it is important that they're easily transferable. So let's start with what is common practice right now. You may have heard about ESOP or VSOP or VSOP. So what are they? How do they work? Let's start with this. So let's start with ESOP. ESOP stands for Employee Stock Option Plan. The definition is, it really is a program that allows employees to acquire options on shares in the company. So meaning, for example, GmbH shares, becoming actually shareholders or Gesellschafter in German. So the option, there are different ways of structuring them. Sometimes they are for free, so you don't have to pay anything to convert. Then it often is a monetary benefit at the time you're issuing the option, or you give a current company valuation and they have the option to pay at the current price, but at a later stage. So only in the case the company increases in value, they would exercise the option. If the company doesn't increase in value, there's no need for exercising them. So, but they would actually receive real shares. The life cycle is easy. They get an offer, which they sign. Then there are usually conditions such as vesting. They have to stay within the company or be affiliated with the company for a certain amount of time. Then there comes a point when they exercise them or not. They forfeiture them. So meaning they don't execute it. And there's an exit of the program, depending on how you structure it, could come later. Even a buyback of the shares is sometimes part of it. So this is the life cycle of the ESOP. So what's the difference between ESOP and VSOP or VSOP? The VSOP is a virtual stock option plan. Here the definition is that this is a program that allows employees to acquire options on virtual shares in the company, often free of charge. This corresponds to an agreement on a special payment on exit, meaning they are not becoming shareholders. This is not an option to go to the notary one day and become a Gesellschafter in a German GmbH. This is only, you could say, a special payment on the exit. It's like if you give them a special payment for Christmas, you can have contracts like this. They get like a 13th monthly salary or something like that. And this is very similar. It's in the end only saying if there's an exit event, they're becoming a certain payment. And it's also taxed accordingly. So, but there's no way for them in getting actually company shares. So virtual shares are a contractual guarantee to receive part of the exit proceeds and not real shares. So that's the main difference. So let's look at how it works from a tax perspective. You have just a disclaimer. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not a lawyer. So this is for informational or educational purposes. Of course, you have to get your own tax accountant or tax lawyer to work out the details for you in your particular situation. But in general, ESOP is taxable at the time the option is exercised. I've seen ESOP programs where part of them was that it's only exercisable at an exit. Some of them, you can exercise them before, for example, after the vesting is completed. So at that time, exercising means you actually go to the notary and getting actually company shares. At that point, they are taxed. Taxed as a monetary benefit to your progressive income tax rate. So as this is often a one-time event, and in the case those shares also have a large value, then it's often something like up to 45% what you have to pay in tax. So at least it's a taxable event. So all the performance thereafter, so let's say you have become a shareholder, now the shares increase in value, withholding tax or in German Abgeltungssteuer, which is usually around 25%. So the problem you have, the moment you go to the notary and you're getting those shares, you have to pay the income tax, which you often cannot do because there is no cash payment. That's one reason why sometimes they say we only exercise them when there's an exit, because at an exit you do have cash. So there's this tri-income problem. There is a solution for this for small and medium-sized enterprises. So for most startups, the exception is that the taxes are only due when there's a sale or transfer of those shares, or when the employee leaves the company, or at least after 12 years. So even if he's still in the company and have not sold his shares. There's a new law which has come in place starting this year, actually. So it's already active. That makes it a bit easier. So it first extended the definition of what a small or medium enterprise is to up to 1,000 employees or up to 100 million in revenue. And now it's due after 15 instead of 12 years. Or there is an option that even if you leave the company, if the company takes on the liability for this tax, that they would pay it in case you don't, then there's also a tax deferral until an exit. Here the question comes, of course, in practice, if you leave in bad faith, there's no real reason for a company to do this. There's no real benefit. If you have a good relationship to your employer, you might get them to take on this liability, so you can defer the tax payment. And there's also a tax-free amount, which got increased from 1,440 to 2,000 euros. So up to that amount, you can issue those shares or ESOPs or execute them without paying taxes. So how do tax work for VSOPs? It's similar, but certainly not the same. since VSOPs are only a contractual agreement to pay at an exit, the taxable event is also at the exit, so at the time of payment. At that moment, though, you have to pay the income tax rate, which again is up to 45%. So there is no capital gain because you didn't receive something which increased in value. You only get this promise of getting this exit participation. So from a tax perspective, VSOPs are actually not good. So, but you do not have any try-income problem. Since you get only paid at the very end, where you actually also receive cash, you have to pay a lot of taxes, but only actually when receiving cash. So no try-income problem. So what's the life cycle? They are very similar for ESOPs and VSOPs. In the beginning, there's an offer. So then there's a vesting, then you exercise them or not, and then there's the exit. So what's part of the offer? You need to have, of course, an amount of VSOPs or ESOPs in terms of shares someone is getting, the price, and the vesting terms, under which conditions they are getting this offer. Vesting terms can be very different, but the most common vesting terms are that it's based on company affiliation, also called vesting time. Very standard, which I've seen is 4 years. Sometimes people also do 5 years, that you only receive all those shares or VSOPs or ESOPs after 4 or 5 years. Usually you are vesting linearly, meaning you're accruing basically the right to receive those options or shares over time. Often there is a cliff. A cliff is like a minimal company affiliation time. Of example, is often 6 to 12 months, meaning if you would leave before the cliff is over, then you would have no rights to any token options or anything whatsoever. It's like a probation period. But after the time, you have accrued some rights and continue to do this until your maximum company affiliation is over and you have the full vesting is done and you have the rights to all of the shares, options, or tokens. Some contracts also use milestones, but if you do milestone-based, they need to be very, very specific, so they are enforceable. So it cannot be some vague this explanation of once we are like successful, whatever this means. So it needs to be very, very specific. So that's the vesting time. So then let's come to exercise them. For ESOPs, exercising them meaning purchase of shares. So notarization is required. You go to notary and the employee becomes an actual shareholder with all shareholder rights, including voting, all the governance rights, any other shareholder has as well. Sometimes people pool employees into a special vehicle, which makes it even more complicated, but keeps the cap table a bit more cleaner. So for any larger decisions, you don't have to come, like let's say there are 100 employees at one point and they're all shareholders and you need their signature for everything you do. For those reasons, sometimes pools are used. If they are not purchased, well, they often just expire. So if you don't execute this option. So options that are not exercised expire. And sometimes in some VSOP or ESOP programs, there are rules that the GmbH is allowed to repurchase them, meaning they can prevent you from becoming a shareholder and just pay you out, depending on the contract. Since ESOP and VSOPs, they're not like completely standardized, you can put in those contract technically whatever is legal and change them according to your needs. So this is the basic life cycle. So let's go quickly through some advantages of VSOPs compared to ESOPs. No notary is required at any point in time. Since they don't become shareholders, you don't promise shares, it's just a contract for exit participation. It's very simple. So also you don't need any amendment to the articles of association and German Gesellschaftsvertrag, which makes them even easier. And the tax only due when a payment is made, so there is no try-income problem. So this is the reason why most companies, at least in the past, have chosen VSOPs. It might change in the future since of this new law which has come out this year, the Zukunftsfinanzierungsgesetz or Future Act law. Let's see if more companies switch to actually ESOPs. What are the disadvantages? Well, shareholders, investors, and employees do not have the same asset. So a VSOP is not a company share, and they are not tradable or transferable. You cannot say, let's say an employee is selling his VSOP to someone else or to an investor. You cannot compare it because it's a different asset. Also, they are not transferable or tradable. the taxation is very high. So you have to pay tax on the payout when there is an exit event at your progressive income tax rate, which easily can be 45%. And this can sometimes happen 20 or 30 years later. And in those times, usually if you would have bought stock on the stock market, you only pay the capital gains tax. And in that case, even though it's comparable to capital gains, tax-wise, it's not. It's actually like income, which you receive just way later. And also most of them do not make any payments outside of the exit, meaning you do not get dividends. So let's say, for example, the employee has VSOPs, the company is never doing an exit, but it's very profitable and paying out dividends every year to the shareholders. Those employees are getting nothing. So this is actually a problem. So that's why you cannot compare those employees to shareholders, also not financially. That's also why VSOPs are not the same as shares. And it's not a digital asset. So it's not easily transferable on all the other benefits digital assets have. So now let's come to GmbH tokens. And before I go into the part about employee participation, I will explain what a GmbH token is. And then how it can be applied to the problem of employee participation. Because you can also use the GmbH token for things like private or public offers for getting investors into your company. But it's not a topic of today. It will be a topic in the upcoming webinars. So let's start with the legal side. A GmbH token is represents a participation right, in German Genussrecht. And in this participation right, those holding the token receive dividends, exit participation, so when the company sells, liquidation proceeds, the company is liquidated, and basic information rights to the annual financial report. With this, and that's a very important part, a token holder is economically on the same footing as a shareholder. There is no economic right a shareholder has, which a token holder does not have. This makes it very powerful compared to VSOPs, where you, for example, don't get any dividends or liquidation proceeds, no information rights, and so on. So it is really comparable to being a shareholder. The thing you don't have is voting rights or governance rights, because they cannot be given out as a Genussrecht or participation right. There's another thing you have, which is very special, which is a put option to give the token back to the company and receive actual shares. So comparable to a conversion right. And with this, there is no doubt and no question that a GmbH token always has exactly the same value as an actually GmbH share, which is in the commercial register or Handelsregister. So it's economically they are the same, and there's a way to convert those tokens into shares. The conversion, of course, happens at the notary, but it's more a very exceptional event. You only need it if you want to exercise your governance rights. For economic rights, you don't need it, and we don't see a big reason why you should convert, as long as everything, as if you don't have a fight with the CEO and want to like replace him, but you can only replace him if you have enough voting rights, which is not the case for most employees. So that's why there is now such emphasis on giving voting rights to employees, since they don't have enough voting power in most cases. That's why having economic rights is usually completely sufficient. So that's the legal part of it. So economically the same as shareholders. So what's the technical part of it? They are so-called ERC20 tokens on the Ethereum mainnet. For those who do not understand what this means, Ethereum is a public blockchain, one of the most used ones and very stable and decentralized ones. ERC20 is just a token standard, so it's compliant with all the wallets and technical infrastructure out there. And to begin with, why are we using a blockchain? And you have heard this question very often, I guess. Why blockchain? And then there are very dumb answers around there, but we actually have a very good response to this question. We are using blockchain, so the company is absolutely not dependent on us. Meaning, in the very unlikely scenario, the tokenizer would not exist anymore. The token would continue to operate, because the token operates on Ethereum. The legal contract, of course, valid as well. So as it doesn't matter to which notary you're going to register your company, it doesn't matter which company is creating the token for you. So you're not dependent on tokenizer or any other third-party provider. You could compare the public Ethereum chain like the commercial register. So the commercial register on German Handelsregister is what the government gives you to register actual company shares. We are giving you basically the public blockchain as a digital register to register your tokens. That's the biggest difference. So technically, you have those tokens. As a CEO of the company, you have special rights. You have admin rights to create tokens, to burn tokens, and so on. You can have certain requirements, such as an allow list, that only addresses which are on this allow list are allowed to hold or send or transfer the token. So you can actually restrict this. You can also make lockups. That's more important for investors, that they cannot transfer the tokens for a certain amount of times. And for employees, we have the vesting smart contract, which on-chain enforces the vesting time. So all of this is done in the legal contract and technically on-chain, and not in any tokenized database, or the web app is just a convenience function to interact with it. So it's very important to understand. This makes the GmbH token also so powerful, because as I said, our web application is just a convenience function, if you want, to interact with it. Technically, you can do it all yourselves directly with different applications, or even using something like Etherscan for those who are a bit more technically advanced. So this is the legal and tech side. We'll stop with the tech stuff now. How do we link the legal rights to this token? On two ways. One, there's a simple contract which says if you have the token, you have those rights. But there is one problem with it. Let's say the tokens actually become traded very heavily, then there is a risk that if, let's say, investor or token holder A sells to token holder B, C, D, E, and so on, that there's an invalid link, meaning there's an investment contract which is not valid for whatever reason. Let's say some minor transferred a token which was not old enough, or someone was not in a condition to actually don't have the authority to sign such a contract. There can be very many reasons why this link of investment contracts could not be valid. And for this reason, we're using something called a public reward, or in German Auslobung, which is very powerful but simple. The GmbH, or the company, publicly announces that whoever has this token and is doing a certain action, which you can only do as a holder of the token, is rewarded with those rights. So what does it give us? What does it give you? It gives you that you do not get the rights based on a legal contract, but based on an action you can only do if you are a holder of the token. The action itself is trivial. It's basically signing a transaction, which you can do on our web app. But with this, you're completely independent of how you got the token, who had it before, how it was transferred. All of this doesn't matter. If you do have the token, you can execute this very simple action, and you are rewarded for this action by with this participation right. So I have a QR code here if you want to go deeper into the legal stuff. This is written by our partner CMS, who has developed most of the legal work behind this. So I would encourage you to read this if you want to know how this works, how we legally link those rights to the token. Okay, with this, I think we have a good understanding of what the GmbH token is. So let's go now to the life cycle of the GmbH token. So first there's an offer, then there's a vesting, you exercise them. In that case, it's called minting. You're actually minting the tokens or creating the tokens at that point, and you have an exit of the program. Offer is very similar to VSOPs and ESOPs. There are terms to be accepted by contract, which is the amount of tokens, price per tokens, vesting terms. And the employee actually receives an option to create the token, a so-called minting right. So why are we not giving the token out right away? Instead, why are we doing this option thing? It's one reason is taxes, because you only have to pay the tax at the moment you mint the tokens. In German, it's called Zuflussprinzip. So only when there is an inflow of an asset, you have to tax it. So the employee can choose when this moment is. So he has a right, which the company also cannot just delete, to at any point in time mint the amount of tokens he has already vested. And at that point, it's a taxable event. So vesting, very similar. There's usually company affiliation and a cliff. I already explained what this is. Exercise, as I just said, the time of exercise is freely selectable by the employee. So he can choose at which time he exercises it, and then he mints the amount of token he already vested. So let's say it's a 4-year vesting, and so after 2 years, he can mint half of it, and then the other half after the 4 years are over, or he can choose to mint everything after 4 years, or he can choose to mint every day a little bit, up to him. So technically, the tokens are transferable after that, except if the founder has decided that there's an allow list or any lockup periods where this is not allowed. So the exit in that case is he receives the tokens he already vested by minting them. And then it's very similar to shares in an AG. There are no separate rules since they are technically freely tradable. So our legal construct is looking very similar to that of an AG, even though we are talking about a GmbH. So sometimes I like to call the GmbH token the AG style of investing or doing employee participation in a GmbH. Okay, how does it look like from a tax perspective? It's actually a little bit similar to the ESOP program. So the tokens are taxed at the time of minting. So Zutschlussprinzip. At the time, and this time can be chosen freely by the employee. At that time, he has to pay, since this is a monetary benefit, subject to progressive income tax. So again, 14 to 45%. But since he can also mint just a little bit at the time, he can basically optimize also the income tax. Because if you do everything at once, it's very likely that you have to pay very high income tax percentage-wise. But if you do a little bit per year, you often can get into lower income tax percentage-wise. So the value which grows thereafter, after he has minted the tokens, are withholding tax, so Abgeltungssteuer, which is usually around 25%, so way better. As I said, the time is free is selectable by the employee. There's one caveat. He needs to have a company evaluation for the tax offices. So usually you do this at times when there is significant funding, the funding round was completed, or some other sale of shares or token has happened, or there is an officially company valuation there, because you need this for the government tax offices. So you have the same exceptions, which are valid for VSOPs and ESOPs, for small and medium-sized enterprises, which are you only actually have to pay the tax when there's a sale or transfer of the tokens, then you leave the company, or the employee leaves the company, or the employer assumes the liability for the taxes, or at latest after 15 years. And you have this allowance of 2,000 per year. So very similar. So let's go to a very simple calculation. And now it's a little bit math, but I think it's important to understand this as a practical example how this works. So let's say you have a normal GmbH with 25,000 shares in the commercial registry, so Handelsregister. There are investors out there who hold 5,000 tokens. So this means it brings a total of 30,000 in shares plus tokens. That's like your economic or virtual shares if you want. So let's say Alice receives a salary of 80,000 euros per year and another 20,000 per year in tokens for the next 4 years. This would mean, let's calculate first, when we want to now create a vesting plan, you need to know the valuation of the company for making a price per token. So let's say we're giving out this at a company valuation of 12 million euros. Then you have to calculate the price per share by dividing company valuation divided by amount of shares / tokens. In our case, 30,000 means the price per share or tokens, which is always the same, share or token, doesn't matter, is 400 euros. This means since we want to give Alice 20,000 per year, she needs to get 50 tokens per year in order to get a value of 20,000. So hope it makes sense so far. So how does the vesting plan look like? So what are the terms in the legal and also in the technical smart contract? 200 tokens. Let's say we have put in a cliff of 1 year. So if she leaves within 1 year, she gets nothing. And the duration of the vesting is 4 years. So this would be the only data you would put in the web app when you create a vesting plan for this employee. So let's now, what happens after that? So let's say Alice is minting her tokens after 5 years at a 30 million euro valuation. So then this means 30 million euro, that one token or share has the value of 1,000 euros. So the monetary benefit of minting those 200 tokens would be 200,000 euro. So the taxes on this would be 90,000 euros. But she doesn't have to pay it yet. She can wait until she sells the tokens or until there's an exit in the company. So now, let's say 10 years later, there is an exit at 100 million euros valuation. Then the value per token is 3,300 euros. And she gets a payout of 200 times the 3,311 euros, which is over 500,000, 662,000. She has to pay now the withholding tax of the increase. So the difference between the exit valuation and the valuation where she minted the tokens. So in this case, 3,311 minus 1,000 times the amount of tokens, 200, then your tax rate is about 115,000 in taxes. So the total tax burden is now the 90,000 from the minting plus the 150,000 from the Abgeltungssteuer or withholding tax. So the profit of Alice is about 456,000. Now let's compare this with traditional ESOP or VSOP. There she would pay the 45% on the total amount at the time of exit. So a much, much higher tax burden, about almost 300,000. So Alice's profit would only be, so only, of course, it's still a lot, 364,000. This is just to give you the example how tax optimized the GmbH token is. Okay, now let's go to one of the last slides, the comparison. So if you now compare those four options you have, either directly issuing company shares, doing an ESOP program, a VSOP, or GmbH token. So let's first look at complexity. Actually giving out shares, meaning going to notary and getting an entry in the commercial register. In the ESOP, at least it means a notarized contract in the beginning, and then you can issue them. VSOP is a simple contract with an employee, so not as, from the complexity, I think one of the easiest. The GmbH token also is a contract with the employee, which is done on our platform, plus a digital token. So they need something called a wallet. It's out of scope for this presentation today, but it adds a little bit complexity. So tax-wise, company shares means at the moment you're going to the notary and giving them shares, they have to pay their income tax. After that, all the difference in the value of the share is withholding tax. So you do have a tri-income problem in that moment you go to the notary. For ESOPs, it is very similar. Income tax at amount exit or when you exercise those options. Potentially a tri-income, depending on when you exercise the option. And for VSOPs, there is no tri-income problem, but you have to pay income tax on the full amount. For the GmbH token, as I explained, income tax when you mint, but the time of minting is freely choosable by the employee and withholding tax after that. So from a liquidity point of view, company shares are transferable only by the notary. So if you find a buyer, you have to go to the notary and all the other shareholders have to agree. ESOPs and VSOPs are not transferable. GmbH tokens are technically easily transferable. And once there exist secondary markets for them or security token exchanges, they are technically tradable, as long as the GmbH allows that. So which rights do they have? Well, company shares have the full rights of a shareholder, governance rights, economic rights, everything. ESOPs, only after you exercise the option, you have all the rights of a shareholder. In VSOPs, you only have exit participation, so no governance rights, no dividends, no liquidation proceeds, no information rights. As a GmbH token, you have all the economic rights as a shareholder, and you have the put option to convert them to actual shares if you need governance rights. Because as long as you hold the token, there are no governance rights. So this is the comparison. So what are then the advantages of the GmbH token? You have one asset for all stakeholders, be it investors, be it employees, even company shareholder in future rounds can add tokens to their portfolio. And meaning having one asset for all is simply compared to a public traded company with stocks. One asset for everyone means they can freely trade them or transfer them between each other. Economic equality with shareholders, tradable, no notary required, so you save quite some costs. If you use our standard legal templates, you also save some legal costs with lawyers. It's all digital process, so there is no need for signing something by hand. The complete process, the overview of who is holding how much tokens, everything is digital in our platform, or technically actually everything is digital on the blockchain. It's tax optimized, and those GmbH tokens can also be used for private offerings as well as crowd investings. Also Web3 applications, and just mentioning DeFi, standing for decentralized finance. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. What else can be done in the future with those tokens? For example, using them as a collateral for giving yourself a loan. All those options are there in the DeFi world, and those tokens give you access to it. So the GmbH token is an uncomplicated and powerful instrument for employee participation in GmbHs. So that's our result. We have worked on this quite a long time and very happy with the result. Here's another blog post going a little bit deeper into those participation rights for employees, written by lawyers. I recommend you read it if you want to go deeper in the legal stuff. So now we have time for a product demo, and after that we are going into the questions you might have. So let me just switch the screen 1 second. So if you go on Tokenize it and starting the app, it is first asking you to connect either with your wallet, or we also allow a Google login for convenience sake. So if your employees, for example, have no idea what a blockchain is, what a token is, and what a wallet is, and don't want to get into that topic, they can simply log in with Google and be done with it. So we made it very, very easy to use. So I'm now connecting my Coinbase wallet in that case to log in. From a security perspective, of course, it's also a very nice thing to always sign everything you do. So 1 second. So now I'm connected. I can now sign in by actually signing a cryptographic message. So I'm now setting up a test account here. This is just for visualization purposes. And if you want, as a founder, if you're in a platform, you can see your token cap table. You can see what you can do with this, like creating private offers. I just did here one example here, employee participation programs, or crowd investing, which is coming very, very soon. So if you now click on create, you have to choose between one of those threes. We are choosing vesting plan today. So what will you see? You can now choose create a vesting plan as follows. For who is the vesting? Let's choose Alice in that case. Alice Müller. So how many tokens will she be getting? We had this example of 200 tokens. What's the vesting date? So when did you start working for the company? So you can have this in the future, or you can have this in the past. Let's say she started 1st of February last month. Cliff period, I'm choosing 12 months. Duration 4 years. So that will be 48 months. So those are now the terms of her vesting plan. So now I see the summary. Name, how many coins, vesting start date, cliff period, vesting period, platform fees. We are charging 2% token fee and 5 years per month per employee. If everything is fine for you, you can agree and create a vesting plan. And that's it. Now you have a link you can copy and send to Alice. The link is password protected, ideally through a different communication channel. You send her this password, and then she can log in, these the terms. She will also see a legal document that you have uploaded during the company onboarding, which you will sign digitally on the platform, and then she's set and done. Once she's set, is now step number 2. You are getting the information that she has signed everything. Then you can log in and countersign digitally the contract and mint the token. And this happens on our platform. It's extremely convenient and easy. And you always have an overview of who's vesting, how much, and makes it easy for you to manage the company and focus on other things. So this is now, you can always, of course, track. You can also generate new passwords to see always where you're standing in the process. And once you have many employees, you will see here a list of employees, the status of their vesting plan, how much they have vested already. Right now, we only have this one example here, but it quickly fills up once you have more than one employees. Okay, so much about the demo. Thank you very much for your attention so far.